If this message touched your heart, share it with someone you love. For the light of God shines brighter when it is shared. May His peace rest upon you tonight. When we close our eyes and whisper the prayer that begins with the words, "Our Father, who art in heaven," we believe we are repeating the same words, spoken by Jesus Himself. But what if what we know today is not the complete truth? What if the words that once carried divine resonance have been quietly reshaped by centuries of power, translation, and silence? For 2,000 years, millions of voices have risen together across temples, cathedrals, and humble rooms. The rhythm of this prayer has crossed oceans, nations, and tongues. It has been sung in joy, cried in pain, and whispered in death. Yet beneath its beauty lies a secret buried deep within time. The reality that the prayer we recite may not be the one that left the lips of the Christ. The story begins in the language of Fire Aramaic, the mother tongue of Jesus. In that sacred language, every word is a vibration, every sound, a bridge between heaven and earth. When Jesus taught His disciples how to pray, He did not offer mere phrases. He offered a living vibration that could awaken the divine within every soul. But the world that followed did not preserve that vibration. It translated it, redefined it, and sometimes muted it. As Christianity spread through empires, languages shifted. The Greek scholars, the Latin translators, and the councils of power each shaped the words to fit the theology of their time. The simple cry of the heart, Abun de Boishmaya, meaning "O birther of the cosmos, source of all light," became "Our Father, who art in heaven." In one translation, the living source became a distant ruler. In another, the intimacy of creation turned into hierarchy. And so, across generations, the language of love slowly transformed into the language of control. The prayer that was once an awakening of the inner soul became a ritual repeated without understanding. Few noticed when the meaning of forgiveness was altered, when temptation became sin, or when daily bread turned into sustenance for the body alone, rather than nourishment for the spirit. But there were some who noticed. Hidden among ancient monasteries and forgotten scrolls were whispers of the original prayer, not as a formula, but as an experience of divine unity. In these forgotten words, God was not a distant judge, but the breath within all creation. He was the pulse in the stone, the whisper in the wind, the spark within human hearts. In the deserts of Egypt and the caves of Syria, early mystics continued to chant the prayer in its oldest form, preserving syllables that shimmered with meaning. The Church, however, feared such knowledge. It was not that the words were false, it was that they were too free. For in those words lay a truth that could not be owned, licensed, or controlled. History shows us that after the Council of Nicaea and later gatherings, subtle changes were introduced, not to deceive, but to consolidate. The Church sought order. It sought unity. But in doing so, it silenced something divine, the breath of the living Word. Centuries later, as scholars studied ancient texts from the Middle East, they found fragments of a prayer not entirely the same as the one known today. Some called it heresy, others called it revelation. But to those who listened with the heart, it was something else entirely, an invitation to rediscover what was once lost. Imagine, for a moment, the scene 2,000 years ago. Jesus stands upon a quiet hill, His followers gathered at His feet. The wind moves gently through olive trees. He lifts His eyes, and with a voice filled with compassion and fire, He begins to pray, not to a throne above, but to the divine presence that lives within and around all things. That prayer was not about begging or pleading. It was about remembering. It was the melody of a soul returning home, and those who heard it felt heaven open within themselves. Today, that same call echoes once again. From ancient manuscripts to modern seekers, the voice of truth is rising. The true Lord's Prayer, the one that awakens, rather than commands, is not gone. It waits in the silence between our words and our breath. Perhaps this is why your heart is listening now, because something within you remembers not the ritual, but the relationship, not the command, but the communion. The next time you whisper those familiar words, pause. Let them breathe. Ask yourself, not with intellect, but with spirit, am I repeating a text, or am I awakening a presence? For when you truly speak the prayer as Jesus did, the kingdom is not above, it is within, and that is the secret the centuries tried to hide. Centuries have passed, and yet the prayer remains on our lips. The same rhythm, the same words, the same faith. But deep within those words lie layers that few ever touch. For most of history, the prayer has been recited, not explored. It has been memorized, not lived. But in the quiet corners of the world, certain voices have whispered what many dared not say, that the prayer of Christ was once far more intimate, far more cosmic, and far more transformative than we were ever told. The early mystics of the East, the Desert Fathers, the Essenes, the Copts, spoke of the prayer not as a recitation, but as a spiritual alignment. They said that to speak those words in Aramaic was to tune the soul to the vibration of heaven. Each phrase was a key, each sound a bridge between the inner and outer world. To them, the true Lord's Prayer was less about speaking to God and more about becoming one with Him. But as the Roman Empire absorbed the faith, the mystical became institutional, the personal became political, and the inner became external. The power of the prayer was redefined. The word Father, once meaning source of all life, became Master. The word Heaven, once meaning the ever-present field of divine energy, became a distant place above. And thy kingdom come, once a declaration of awakening within, became a promise postponed until death. The church did not set out to deceive, it set out to organize. It sought unity, structure, and authority. But in the process, the living breath of Jesus' teaching became doctrine. And doctrine, over time, became dogma. Yet every so often, light breaks through the cracks. A forgotten scroll, an ancient hymn, a fragment of a letter. And suddenly the old words begin to breathe again. In 1892, a small monastery in Syria revealed fragments of Aramaic text, written on palm leaves. The lines spoke not of a distant God, but of the divine presence flowing through all creation. It said, "Heaven is not above you. It is within you, around you, and through you." That phrase alone shattered centuries of separation. Other discoveries followed: fragments in Egypt, copies in Armenia, and letters written by early believers who still spoke the old tongue. Together, they formed a mosaic of revelation, a portrait of a prayer that was both mystical and human. It was not a formula to reach heaven. It was a doorway to awaken heaven within. Jesus' prayer, in its earliest form, was a song of unity. It did not begin with guilt, but with gratitude. It did not plead for mercy, but affirmed the divine connection already present. One fragment reads, "Abun de Boashmaya Netkadash Shmach," which, in its most faithful sense, means, "O birther of the cosmos, you who create all from the vibrating light of your being, let your name be made holy in all that we become." Do you feel the difference? It is not the cry of a servant to a master. It is the recognition of the divine spark within every breath. And yet, this knowledge was considered dangerous. Why? Because a humanity that knows itself as divine cannot be ruled by fear. A soul that sees God within cannot be manipulated by guilt. If each person carries the spark of creation, then the distance between priest and believer disappears. And with it, the hierarchy that defined centuries of control begins to crumble. That is why, throughout history, the mystical always lives on the margins, persecuted, misunderstood, yet never extinguished. For truth, even when buried, grows roots in the dark. When you whisper the prayer tonight, listen between the lines. When you say, "Our Father," do not imagine a throne above. Imagine the infinite within you, the light that was there before words, before language, before religion. You are not meant to repeat this prayer as a ritual. You were meant to remember who you are through it. That is the essence of what Jesus gave a key to unlock the divine self. But when the key was replaced by ritual, humanity began to forget. And that forgetting became the shadow of faith. A faith of fear instead of freedom. The mystics say, when you remember the true prayer, you cease to pray for heaven. You become heaven's voice. So perhaps the hidden truth of the Lord's Prayer is not what was removed from the text, but what was removed from us. The capacity to listen inwardly, to feel the presence that breathes when no words are spoken. The true prayer was never meant to control the divine. It was meant to awaken it in you. When the last candle of evening fades, a silence deeper than sound descends. It is in that stillness that the prayer begins to reveal itself, not as words, but as light, not as doctrine, but as remembrance. For what Jesus offered was never meant to be memorized. It was meant to be lived. He spoke of a kingdom not of marble or throne, but of breath and presence. He did not invite us to build temples in His name, but to discover the temple already standing within the heart. Through centuries, humanity has repeated His prayer with devotion, yet forgotten the doorway that each line opens. Every phrase was once a path, every sound, a vibration aligned with creation itself. The ancients said that when Jesus uttered these words in His own tongue, the air itself trembled with recognition, as if the universe remembered its source. But when translation replaced experience, and institution replaced encounter, something sacred grew quiet. The prayer became a ritual of repetition, instead of a revelation of transformation. Still, the hidden current never ceased to flow. In the monasteries of the East, in the caves of Sinai, in the whispering deserts of Judea, men and women knelt not to speak, but to listen. They said that when you breathe the prayer slowly, it begins to breathe you. It moves through the lungs, through the bloodstream, until the body itself becomes a vessel of divine rhythm. And then, without a single word, you begin to pray simply by being. This was the mystery that frightened empires, that heaven could dwell in human skin, that eternity could be heard in a heartbeat. The more power feared this truth, the more deeply it was buried. And yet, every generation has felt its echo. The poets of Persia called it the silent flame. The mystics of Europe called it the living light. The early believers of the East called it the breath of God. All spoke of the same truth. That prayer is not about reaching upward, but awakening inward. For the divine does not demand your voice. It desires your awareness. In Aramaic, the word for holy Netkadosh does not mean separated from the world, but fully revealed through it. To say, "Hallowed be thy name," was never to exalt a distant deity, but to allow the divine nature to shine through all that exists. Through your eyes, your hands, your compassion. That is why the earliest form of the prayer was sung, not spoken. Its rhythm matched the beating of the heart. Its cadence followed the breath. The faithful would chant it as they walked, as they worked, as they wept, and the air around them shimmered with stillness. They did not ask for heaven. They became its reflection. What changed? Perhaps the same thing that changes in every age. Fear. The fear of losing control. The fear of simplicity. The fear that the sacred might not belong to the few, but to all. So words were rewritten, rituals were fixed, and mystery was domesticated. But God cannot be contained by translation. The divine always escapes the cage of language. Even today, if you close your eyes and whisper the prayer not as a recitation, but as remembrance, you will feel what the ancients felt. The breath will slow, the mind will quiet, and something within will answer back. Not in sound, but in presence. That presence is the real Lord's Prayer. It is not written on paper or carved in stone. It is written across the fabric of your soul. When Jesus said, "Thy will be done," he was not surrendering to fate. He was aligning his human will with divine harmony, the balance that holds the stars, the rhythm that guides the tides, the wisdom that breathes through every living being. Thy will be done means, let the pattern of divine love move freely through me. It is not submission. It is participation. It is the moment when the human voice merges with the eternal echo. That, perhaps, is the secret that the Church could not preserve. For no structure can contain living truth. The true prayer cannot be owned, only awakened. So when you whisper these words tonight, "Our Father, who art in heaven," hear them not as a ritual, but as a remembering. You are not reaching toward God. You are returning to the God within you. And as that light rises quietly, you will understand what was hidden all along. The prayer was never lost, only waiting for you to listen again. In the earliest dawn of faith, before parchment and priest, there was only the voice. It spoke not from heaven's distance, but from within the heart of creation. Every living thing responded to it. The waves, the trees, the breath of humankind. When Jesus walked among the hills of Galilee, that same voice spoke again, clothed in human language. But he did not speak as men had spoken before. He spoke as one who remembered the sound behind the sound, the language of the beginning. His disciples listened, not merely to his words, but to the spaces between them. For in those pauses, the very Spirit of God seemed to move. The prayer he gave them, the one we call the Lord's Prayer, was not born from a scroll. It rose from silence. It was not meant to be repeated, but experienced. When he said, "Our Father," he used the word Abun, an Aramaic sound that means far more than Father. It is the vibration of life's origin, the source that breathes through every being. It means, O birther of the cosmos, the one whose light gives birth to all realms of existence. In that single word, heaven and earth were united. The Creator and creation became one song. The early followers of the Way knew this. They prayed not to a distant throne, but to the living presence within all things. Their voices rose with the wind, their hearts beat with the rhythm of the divine breath. But as centuries turned, languages changed, and power began to speak louder than love. What was once living truth became sacred text, and the fire of revelation was replaced by the comfort of repetition. Still, traces of the original sound remain. In certain monasteries of the desert, old monks still chant Abun de Boishmaya, "Our Father who art in the shining heavens." Yet they explain, heaven is not a place, but a state of awareness. It is the realization that God's light fills all things. When they breathe the phrase slowly, they feel the air vibrate with divine resonance. It is said that the word Abun aligns the heart and lungs, restoring balance between body and spirit. Every exhalation becomes a prayer, every inhalation, an act of creation. This was how Jesus prayed, not upward toward the sky, but inward toward the eternal light within. He knew that the divine was never far, only forgotten. The prayer he gave was a map to remembrance. Each word was a gate, each sound a step back into unity. To say Abun was to awaken the source. To say De Boishmaya, in the shining heavens, was to recognize that heaven is here and now. In that realization, the illusion of distance vanished. The heart became the altar. The breath became the incense, and the silence between each phrase became the holiest of sanctuaries. Those who understood this prayed differently. They did not beg. They listened. They did not demand. They surrendered. They did not seek a miracle. They became one. It was in that stillness that the kingdom appeared, not as walls or thrones, but as light reflected in every living face. Jesus told them, "The kingdom of God is within you." And in that sentence, he redefined eternity. The words he spoke have crossed oceans, echoed through cathedrals and deserts alike. But beneath every translation, beneath every tongue, the original voice still sings. It waits for those who are willing to be quiet enough to hear. It waits for those who no longer ask for heaven, but breathe it. It waits for those who remember that prayer is not a formula, but a returning home. That is why the first followers called themselves children of the breath, for they understood that every breath whispered the same truth. God is not somewhere else. God is the space between inhalation and exhalation. And when you pray the prayer as he once did, slowly, with love, without fear, you will feel the same current that moved through him. A warmth will rise within your chest. A stillness will expand behind your eyes. And a quiet certainty will unfold in your heart, saying, "You have never been alone." When light touches stone, it leaves no mark. Yet when the divine light touches the soul, it leaves eternity. In every age, God has spoken through light. The stars, the burning bush, the fire upon Sinai. Each was a spark of the same radiance that once surrounded Jesus as he taught his followers how to pray. Those who were there said that when he prayed, his voice did not rise. It descended, as though heaven itself was breathing downward through him. The prayer was not a command to God. It was a remembrance of oneness. It was the language of light expressed in sound. Every word was a beam, and every beam illuminated the darkness of human forgetfulness. The mystics later called it the hymn of creation. When Jesus said, "Thy kingdom come," he was not speaking of a future event. He was describing a present unveiling, the moment when divine awareness pierces human blindness. The kingdom does not arrive like a dawn upon the horizon. It awakens inside the heart like a flame that remembers itself. In that moment of awakening, you no longer ask, "What must I do?" but whisper, "I am already home." The power of his words lay not in theology but in vibration. Each syllable carried the resonance of the source. Even when the meaning was lost in translation, the sound still healed, the rhythm still sanctified. Ancient texts describe how early believers would gather in silence. They would breathe the prayer, not speak it. Inhale on our Father, exhale on who art in heaven. The cycle of breath itself became worship. As they continued, their minds grew still, their fears dissolved, and many wept without knowing why. They said it felt like the moment before birth, a quiet returning to light. This is what the church tried to preserve, but could never control. Because the true essence of prayer is not ownership, it is awakening. When Jesus taught his disciples, he lifted his hand toward the rising sun and said, "See, the light falls on the just and the unjust alike. That is how my Father loves." In that gesture, he redefined righteousness. It was not obedience that made one holy, but openness. To receive light is to become it. In the original Aramaic, the phrase "Tete Malkuthah," "Thy kingdom come," carries the meaning, "Let the reign of unity blossom through our deeds." It is not a request, it is permission. It means, "Let divine harmony express itself through me." This is the hidden code of the prayer. Each line is both an invocation and a mirror. When you say it with awareness, you are not calling something down. You are calling something forth. The kingdom does not descend from clouds. It rises from consciousness. That is why Jesus spoke so often of eyes that see and ears that hear. He was not describing physical sight or sound, but spiritual perception. To see the kingdom is to recognize light even in shadow. To hear the will of God is to sense His rhythm in every breath. And so, when the prayer continued, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," He was not separating the two realms. He was uniting them. Heaven is not a place above the stars. It is the dimension of pure awareness, where love and law are one. To bring heaven to earth is to live in alignment with that awareness. Every time you forgive, you bring heaven closer. Every time you show compassion, you dissolve the boundary between divine and human. Every time you love without expecting reward, you make earth resemble heaven. This is what Jesus meant when He said, "The kingdom of God is at hand." It is not waiting to appear. It is waiting to be recognized. But recognition requires silence. It requires humility to see the sacred within the ordinary. It requires faith to believe that light can still be found in dust. The early mystics said that the true Lord's Prayer is invisible. It shines through acts, not words. It is carried in every gesture of kindness, every tear of mercy, every moment of surrender. They said that if you pray deeply enough, your hands will start to glow, not with magic, but with memory. For you were light before you were flesh, and prayer is how you remember. That is why Jesus' eyes seemed to hold entire worlds. Those who looked into them said it was like standing in sunlight that could see you. He was not showing them something new. He was reminding them of who they already were. The light He carried was contagious. It passed from heart to heart, generation to generation, like a flame that refuses to die. Empires rose and fell trying to own it. But light cannot be possessed. It can only be shared. So when you say, "Thy kingdom come," say it not as a plea but as a promise, a vow to let light find you again. And in that vow, you will understand what the prayer has always meant. God does not wait to be reached. He waits to be remembered. When Jesus spoke of the will of God, He did not describe a force of control, but a current of harmony. He did not ask His followers to submit, but to flow, to become rivers within the great ocean of divine order. The phrase, "Thy will be done," has often been misunderstood. Many hear it as resignation, a surrender to fate. But Jesus spoke it as awakening, a recognition that divine intention already pulses within creation. To align with that will is not to lose freedom. It is to discover true freedom, the kind that moves with, not against, the breath of the universe. The Aramaic word for will, ritzanak, means the delight or joy that flows from the heart of God. To say, "Thy will be done," is to say, "May your joy flow through me as my own." It is not submission to power, but participation in love. The earliest followers of Christ described this alignment as a state of luminous peace. When they prayed those words, they felt not fear, but expansion. They said it was like standing in a river of golden light, where resistance melts away and only grace remains. To live by divine will is not to abandon reason. It is to see through it, to glimpse the pattern that underlies all movement. Every leaf that falls, every tear that drops, every birth and every death is touched by that same rhythm. The will of heaven is not distant. It is not thunder from above. It is the quiet pulse that beats beneath all things, the pulse that Jesus listened to with every breath. When He healed the sick, it was not through command but through compassion. He did not summon God to act. He simply allowed the will of love to flow through His hands. That is why He said, "The Son can do nothing by Himself, but only what He sees the Father doing." He was not diminishing Himself. He was revealing the truth of oneness. Heaven's will and the human heart's will were never separate. To live this truth requires surrender, but not the kind born of fear. It is surrender like sunlight to morning, like the tide to the moon, a yielding that fulfills its purpose by flowing naturally. The mystics of old spoke of this as the golden obedience. It was not obedience to law, but to love. They said that when the soul truly listens, the universe itself becomes a teacher. One early hermit wrote, "When I cease to speak, the word speaks in me. When I cease to move, the Spirit moves through me." This was the essence of divine will, not domination, but union. "Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." The phrase unites two worlds, not by distance, but by resonance. Heaven is the realm of divine thought, earth the realm of manifestation. When the two are aligned, the invisible becomes visible. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every gesture of humility, each is heaven made visible upon the earth. Jesus lived this alignment perfectly. In Gethsemane, when his heart trembled before the cross, he whispered, "Not my will, but yours be done." In that moment, he turned suffering into surrender, and surrender into light. It was not defeat, but revelation. The human pain he bore became the doorway for divine purpose. The cross, once a symbol of death, became the bridge between worlds. That is the mystery of the will of heaven. What feels like loss is often transformation. What appears as ending is merely becoming. To trust that is to walk in faith deeper than sight. The prayer teaches us to see every experience, joy and sorrow alike, as instruments in God's grand symphony. Each note, even dissonant ones, belong to the same music of grace. And so, to live Thy will be done is to live awake. It is to meet the present moment as holy, to greet every breath as divine participation. For the will of heaven is not imposed, it is invited. It waits at the door of the heart, knocking softly, until we choose to open. And when we do, light enters, not as a blaze, but as dawn. Gentle, patient, inevitable. The same dawn that once fell upon a garden in Galilee, upon a carpenter's son, who listened deeply enough to hear eternity whisper, "My will is love, and my love is in you." There is a fire that burns without consuming. It does not destroy, it transforms. It is the fire that spoke to Moses through the bush, and it is the same flame that glowed in the eyes of Christ when he looked upon the broken and the lost. This fire is not of earth. It does not need wood or air. It feeds upon truth. It is the presence of God made visible, a brightness that purifies all it touches. When the prophets spoke of divine fire, they did not mean wrath. They meant awakening, a fire that burns away illusions, that melts away fear until only love remains. The world fears this kind of light, for it exposes what has long been hidden. But for the soul that longs to see, this fire is mercy itself. When Jesus walked among men, he carried this same fire in silence, not in lightning or storm, but in the stillness of his gaze. Every word he spoke was a spark that fell into the darkness of human hearts. Some received it, and their lives ignited with purpose. Others turned away, afraid of the change it would bring. For divine fire demands surrender, not of freedom, but of falsehood. In ancient times, those who encountered this fire were called the awakened. They said it was like standing before a mirror made of light. You could no longer pretend. You saw yourself as you truly were. And in that truth, you found peace. The purpose of this fire was never punishment. It was purification. As gold is refined in flame, so the soul is refined in the presence of God. Pain, then, becomes a holy teacher. Loss becomes an altar. Every tear becomes an offering of light. In the desert, prophets would wait for this fire. They knew it would not come through violence or fear, but through stillness, when the noise of the world fell silent, and only the voice of God remained. Elijah saw it not in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire that scorched the mountain, but in the gentle whisper that followed. For the true fire of God is not the flame itself, but the word that burns within the silence. When Christ said, "I have come to cast fire upon the earth," He was not threatening destruction. He was announcing rebirth, a fire of renewal that would cleanse, heal, and awaken the world to its divine origin. The fire of God is both near and far. It lives in the sun that rises, and in the quiet heart that prays. It speaks through conscience, through compassion, through the sudden stirring of tears, when truth is spoken aloud. To encounter this fire is to be undone and remade. The ego resists it, for it cannot survive the light. But the soul rejoices, for it remembers this warmth, the fire from which it was first created. God's fire does not shout. It whispers your name. It does not consume your being. It consumes your boundaries. And in that burning, you discover freedom. So when you pray, do not ask for comfort. Ask for the fire that refines. Ask to be made new. Ask to become the light that once found you in darkness. The greatest mystery of divine fire is that it does not descend from the sky. It awakens within. God does not merely send his light from above. He kindles it inside the human heart. For every soul carries a spark of eternity, and it waits only for breath. The breath of prayer, the whisper of surrender, to burst into flame. This is why the prophets spoke of circumcision of the heart. It was not a ritual of flesh, but a transformation of being. When the heart is opened by truth, the fire of God enters, and it begins to cleanse every corner of fear. Many people look for signs in the heavens, lightning, visions, miracles. But the kingdom Jesus spoke of does not come with visible signs. He said, "The kingdom of God is within you." There, in that hidden chamber, the eternal flame waits. It flickers when you forgive. It grows when you love. It burns brightly when you let go of bitterness. And when you pray not to be seen, but to be known by God, the flame becomes pure light. The world tries to extinguish this inner fire. It feeds us noise, distraction, and endless comparison. But the soul was never designed to burn with envy. It was made to shine with compassion. When Jesus met the broken, he did not condemn them. He reignited the light that shame had buried. To the woman who wept at his feet, he said, "Your faith has saved you." He did not see her as fallen. He saw her flame struggling for air. To awaken this inner fire is not easy. It requires silence, honesty, and the willingness to be still long enough for the light to find its way home. Most people fear silence, because in silence they hear themselves. But that is where the voice of God speaks most clearly. It is in the quiet of the soul that his flame becomes visible. Some will feel it as warmth in prayer, others as tears without reason, and some as sudden peace, where there was once unrest. This is the flame that heals without words. It does not shout, it breathes. It whispers through conscience. "Be still, you are mine." When you begin to live from that fire, you see the world differently. What once seemed ordinary becomes sacred. A stranger's face becomes a revelation. Even pain becomes a passage toward love. This is what Paul meant when he said, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." He was describing the moment when the inner flame overtakes the self, when the ego fades, and the divine light becomes the center. Such a person no longer reacts to darkness with fear, but with understanding. They no longer judge, for they see that every soul is a spark still finding its fire. The true disciple of Christ does not seek to escape the world. They become the light within it. Their prayer is no longer, "Lord, give me peace," but "Lord, make me a vessel of your flame." And when the time comes for their body to fade, their fire does not die. It returns to the source. For every act of love is an ember that never goes out. The inner flame is eternal, and once awakened, it cannot be contained. It spreads quietly, from heart to heart, from tear to smile, until the whole world glows with the warmth of God. When the fire within one heart meets the fire within another, a miracle begins. It is the birth of communion, a moment when light recognizes light and the walls between souls begin to fall. This is the secret of God's kingdom. It spreads not by power, but by warmth. Every spark that awakens in one life has the power to ignite 1,000 others. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." He did not say, "You will become light." He said, "You already are." The divine fire has been placed in every soul, waiting for courage to reveal it. The apostles learned this truth after the resurrection. They were afraid, hiding in a locked room. Then the Spirit came like wind and flame, and suddenly their fear turned to song. The same men who once trembled now walked into the world carrying fire in their words. That was the birth of the church, not a building of stone, but a living body of flame. Every time a human heart opens to compassion, that same Pentecostal fire burns again. Every act of forgiveness is a new tongue of flame. Every moment of love is another Pentecost. The world is not changed by argument or law. It is changed by light, the quiet kind that glows from within, that touches without forcing, that warms even those who do not understand it. The divine flame knows no borders. It crosses language, race, and belief. It recognizes only one truth, that every human being is made of the same light. When that light awakens in one, it calls to the light in another. This is how heaven expands, not outward but inward, as love multiplies silently. To carry this fire is a sacred responsibility. It means to speak when silence costs too much. It means to forgive when justice demands vengeance. It means to love when the world says to hate. Such love is not weakness. It is the strongest fire of all. When Jesus said, "I am the vine, you are the branches," he was describing the fire's path. Each branch carries the same life. Each spark belongs to the same flame. To remain in love is to remain connected to the source. If one candle is lit and another draws near, the first loses nothing. Its flame grows stronger. This is the mystery of divine sharing. Light increases by giving. The saints understood this. They did not seek to shine alone. They burned so that others might find the way. Their lives became lanterns along the path for generations to come. In every age, God rekindles this light. When hope seems lost, a single heart begins to glow again. That is how revival begins. Not through thunder, but through one soul remembering love. When you look at the world today, you may see darkness, division, and despair. But remember this, the fire has not gone out. It still burns wherever one person chooses kindness over cruelty, truth over deceit, forgiveness over pride. The light of Christ does not demand perfection. It asks for willingness. It asks you to say, "Here I am, Lord. Let your fire begin with me." And as that prayer rises, the flames unite, heart to heart, nation to nation, world to heaven, until all creation glows with the warmth of God's love. When light comes, it does not accuse, it reveals. The light of God does not arrive to condemn the world, but to uncover what has long been hidden beneath the shadow. It is the light that exposes lies not to shame, but to free, for the truth that burns can also heal. It is like the morning sun after a long night. Its first rays sting the eyes, but soon you realize you can see again. Jesus once said, "I did not come to judge the world, but to save it." And yet, his presence was judgment itself. Not because he condemned, but because his very being made falsehood impossible. Standing before perfect light, the masks we wear cannot survive. Every disguise, every excuse, melts away in its brilliance, and in that moment, the soul is seen not by others, but by itself. This is the mystery of divine judgment. It is not a courtroom, but a mirror. When God's light shines upon you, you do not face a gavel. You face your own reflection, and for many that moment feels like fire, not because God is angry, but because truth burns, where illusion has lived too long. The sinner feels exposed, the proud feel small, the cold heart begins to thaw. That is the mercy of judgment. It is not the end of grace, but the beginning of healing. Throughout Scripture, whenever light appeared, men fell to their knees, not in terror, but in awe. Moses covered his face, because the radiance of God was too holy to bear. Isaiah cried, "Woe is me, for I am unclean." Yet in that same instant, a coal from the altar touched his lips and made him pure. This is how divine judgment works. It is not destruction, but transformation. The fire that judges is the same fire that refines. When the light of Christ enters a heart, it shows us both our wounds and our worth. We see the cracks, but we also see the gold flowing through them. The Japanese call this kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, making it more beautiful for having been broken. That is what grace does. God's light does not erase your scars. It turns them into testimony. It makes your wounds shine with the proof of His mercy. In that light, even the most painful memories become sacred ground, because the moment they are seen by God, they are redeemed. So when the light comes, do not hide. Do not run from the truth that calls your name. Let it find you. Let it warm the places you have kept cold for too long. The light of judgment is not the light that ends life. It is the light that begins it again. For in God's eyes, to be exposed is to be loved completely, not for who you pretend to be, but for who you truly are. There is a fire in God that does not destroy, it restores. It is the fire of mercy, burning at the heart of divine judgment. It is the warmth that melts guilt, the light that finds the lost. In the silence between heaven and earth, this fire burns unseen. It does not roar like thunder, but whispers like breath. It moves wherever a heart breaks open, where tears fall instead of pride. Mercy is not the absence of justice. It is justice fulfilled through compassion. It sees clearly what is wrong, yet chooses to heal rather than to harm. That is the mystery of God's heart, a love that is stronger than condemnation. When Jesus bent down to write in the sand, before the crowd that held stones, He was drawing a line between violence and mercy. He said, "Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone." And one by one, the stones fell to the ground. That day, judgment became mercy. The guilty woman stood trembling before light, and instead of hearing, "You are condemned," she heard, "Go and sin no more." In that moment, fire met flesh and did not consume her, but cleansed her. This is the divine paradox. The same fire that exposes sin also burns away its power. The same light that reveals your weakness reveals God's tenderness within it. Mercy is not softness. It is the strength to see clearly and still choose love. It is the power to forgive when the wound still bleeds. It is the decision to heal what could have been destroyed. When the prodigal son returned home, he expected punishment, but the father ran to him instead. No lecture, no scolding, just an embrace and a feast. That is how God judges. He runs toward you. Even while you're still far off, He wraps you in light before you can speak your apology, because mercy is faster than guilt. The world often mistakes mercy for weakness, but mercy is the fire of the strong. It is the courage to stay kind in a world that has forgotten tenderness. Every act of compassion is a spark from this holy fire. When you forgive, you join God in the work of creation. You build where others would destroy. You heal where others would wound. You bring heaven a little closer to earth. The saints knew this well. They did not see sinners. They saw broken mirrors of light. Their mission was not to judge the cracks, but to reflect the sun until the glass shone again. When you stand before the throne of God, you will not be asked, "Did you sin?" You will be asked, "Did you love?" Because love is the truest judgment. Love sees clearly and yet forgives. Love burns away fear and leaves compassion behind. And the fire of mercy, the eternal fire, will never go out. No throne of wrath. There is a heart that beats with light, a love so vast it fills creation and still has room for you. When the final veil is lifted and every soul stands before God, there will be no shouting, no anger, no cold silence. There will only be light, and in that light, the unmistakable warmth of love. For the essence of judgment is not punishment, but revelation. It reveals who God truly is and who we have always been in Him. The heart of God does not divide the worthy from the unworthy. It gathers the lost, binds the broken, and whispers, "You were always mine." This is the truth the prophets glimpsed in fire, and the saints carried in their tears, that beyond justice, beyond fear, beyond the stories of guilt and shame, there remains only love, inextinguishable, eternal, absolute. Many imagine judgment as a day of terror, but for those who have loved, it will be a day of homecoming. The light that once seemed distant will unfold within them, and they will know they were never apart from God at all. Heaven is not far above. It is the awakening of love within. The true judgment of God is recognition, the moment you finally see that every act of kindness, every tear shed in compassion, every silent prayer was already His heart beating in you. The fire that refines, the light that reveals, the mercy that heals. They are not three things. They are one. And that one thing is love. This is why John wrote, "Perfect love casts out fear." For when love is perfect, there is nothing left to fear, not even judgment. Those who live in love have already passed from death to life. They have already seen the light of God because they carry it within. And when the world's final night arrives, when the stars fall silent and the heavens open, the children of light will not hide. They will rise, not in pride, but in peace, drawn back to the source that made them. In that moment, the universe itself will exhale. Every shadow will surrender. Every heart will remember. And the light, the eternal heart of God, will beat once more, and everything will be made new. For the last judgment is not a sentence. It is an embrace. It is the fire of love, burning away all that is not love, until only love remains. When the light has spoken and the fires of revelation have quieted, there remains a door, still open. It stands between eternity and the present moment, between heaven's silence and the noise of the world. And through that door, a voice continues to call. It is not the voice of command, but the voice of longing. It is the heart of God whispering, "Come home." The story of the ages is not about conquest or fear. It is the story of return, the long journey of the soul, back to the one who never stopped waiting. Every prophet, every psalm, every cross was a signpost on the road home. And now, as the world trembles beneath the weight of its own creation, that road glows brighter than ever. The invitation is not loud. It is not forced. It is written in the wind, in the eyes of a child, in the quiet ache of your heart, when you realize you were made for more than this world. For every generation, God has left the door open, not to escape the world, but to redeem it. The open door is not an exit. It is an entrance to the truest form of life. The book of Revelation ends not with destruction, but with a wedding. Heaven and earth are reunited, and a voice cries out, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man." That voice still speaks. It moves through the ruins, through the cities, through the hearts of those who still dare to believe that love can rebuild what hate has burned. The door of grace is still open. No sin is too great, no night too deep, no distance too far. The light that once judged now invites. The fire that once purified now warms. The voice that once thundered now whispers your name. You do not have to understand it. You only have to listen. For the door of God's mercy was not built to close. It stands open, even now, for those who will turn and take a single step toward the light. There are places in this world where pain has spoken for too long, where prayers have turned to silence, and faith has grown thin like smoke. But even there, especially there, God's hand still rests. He does not pull it away in disgust. He does not recoil from the wounds of the earth. He places his hand upon them, as he did upon the leper, the blind, and the broken. And wherever his hand touches, something begins to live again. The same hand that shaped the stars once traced the tears on a human face. The same hand that calmed the sea now touches the quiet despair of your heart. We often look for God in the thunder, in the miracle, in the power that splits the sky. But the heart of God is found in the whisper, in the small warmth that appears when you forgive, when you wait, when you choose love instead of anger. The divine hand moves through ordinary days. It rests upon hospital beds, in lonely apartments, in the trembling hands of someone praying at night. And every time it rests, light is born. Sometimes we do not see it. Sometimes we mistake the silence for absence. But silence is not the absence of God. It is the sound of his hand waiting, not to strike, but to heal. When Jesus touched the leper, the disease did not stain him. His purity overwhelmed the impurity. The leper was cleansed, and for the first time in years, he felt the warmth of another's skin. That is what grace feels like. It is not a flood of power, but a touch, gentle yet unstoppable. Many of us carry unseen wounds. They may not bleed, but they ache in the dark, and the world teaches us to hide them. But God does not turn away. He seeks those places. He rests his hand upon them, and life begins again. The prophets said, "He will not break a bruised reed, nor quench a smoldering wick." That means there is no heart too fragile, no soul too dim for his hand to reach. Even when all strength is gone, even when your prayer feels lost, he is still near, not demanding words, only permission to stay. And when you finally whisper, "Stay," he does. He stays beside your bed, in your fear, in your remembering, in your returning, and his hand remains steady, patient, until your heart learns that it was never alone. For wherever his hand rests, the kingdom begins again. The light of dawn rises upon the world, and the silence of eternity begins to move again. From the edge of heaven, a voice calls, not with thunder, but with love. It is the same voice that spoke in Eden, that wept at Lazarus's tomb, that whispered forgiveness from the cross. Now it calls once more, across the ages, to every heart still waiting in the shadows. Come home! The final call of God is not shouted through the heavens. It is breathed through the Spirit, into the corners of every soul. No one is beyond its reach, not the wanderer, not the weary, not even the one who believes he cannot be forgiven. For the voice of God does not accuse, it restores. It does not demand perfection, it invites surrender. And when that voice speaks, the creation itself responds. Mountains exhale, oceans still, stars tremble with joy, for they know their Maker is calling his children home. In that moment, the veil between seen and unseen grows thin. Dreams and prayers become one, and every wound finds its meaning in the light that pours from his face. Many will ask, "Is this the end?" But heaven replies, "No, this is the beginning. For the end of all things is not destruction, but reunion. It is the return of love to every corner of creation. The final call is not a warning. It is a wedding song. It gathers, not scatters. It heals, not divides. It awakens the forgotten melody that has been echoing within every soul since the beginning. And one by one, hearts begin to rise, not in fear, but in recognition. They know that voice. It is the sound of home. The earth brightens, the shadows flee, the broken lift their eyes. And as they walk toward the light, they realize the light was walking toward them all along. The voice of God is not far away. It lives now within every breath that loves, every tear that forgives, every act of mercy done in silence. And when the last note of history fades, that voice will still remain, soft, endless, full of love, calling, inviting, embracing, until the final heart says yes.